I never really knew what it was like to have the first-hand experience of seeing people actively ignore threats to what is in their best interest prior to this. So, between the ages of 18 to 29, only 1% of those individuals in that age group that live in the US don't use the internet. 4 in 10 adults that are 65 and older do not use the internet, but only 13% of Americans don't use the internet. So, what I'm conveying here is that as a country, the US, and in particular its people, are very much internet users and I would think would care what happens to it. Um, I'm going to explain this again before I go into the frustrations I have with what's currently being done here. So, in the final draft of the FCC's proposal to destroy net neutrality, um, its order includes allowing internet providers to be free to experiment with fast and slow lanes, prioritize their own traffic, and block apps and services. Now, one person who reads that might say, what's the big deal? It's going to go a little slower. Well, think about this. If you are the opposing company to a group and they seek to destroy your business online, all they have to do is decide, okay, it's going to take an hour for your website to load, or however long they choose or dictate. And not only that, they can decide and determine what prices will need to be waged for people to have faster internet to go to your site. So it becomes this game where it not only hurts the consumer who's seeking to use a product from their competition or some rival company, it also harms the company that is on the receiving end of this personal vendetta that the other company will have against it. It also needs to be understood because what you're going to see, the more you pay attention to this, the more you watch things in relation to this. Typically, when the chairman of the FCC, Agent Pi, is on television, yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Harvey, is on some kind of form of medium, he will make some salacious claim about how this is improving people's lives through X, Y, and Z. And that is done, as is the case with most other public figures whom we know are in the pockets of corporations that thoroughly dictate this idea of, oh, yes, what we're putting in place is really for you. We're just doing things that are good. They're taking cash and then switching their rhetoric around to make it seem as though they're fighting for it. In reality, they're reflecting the best interest of their corporations who would be positively affected by being able to just mess with whichever whichever company they're not affiliated with, the internet providers. Envoy, I've been better after the 12th. It's not going to get any greater. Corporate fascism, yes, but something else needs to be realized here. I don't identify as a person who's Democrat or Republican, but this is certainly an issue that uh, it should be. If I were running against Trump, or if he's still in office in 3 years, which I think he will be, the easiest way for him to be beat is just to keep talking about this story and talk about the internet was its freedom of speech was completely obliterated in his first year in office. That would be the easiest way to just completely trounce him. The scary part is that if you go back to the election cycle last year, he didn't talk much about his policies toward the internet. This person Pi has been speaking about this for years. The reason he's being taken seriously now is back in January, Trump appointed him to be chairman. Prior to this, he didn't have the power to actually go about and try doing this. Now, there was an article published on the LA Times. It was called "I'm on the FCC, please stop us from killing net neutrality." I go over to try reading it, and I get a little pop-up ad that says, "You've reached your monthly free articles limit. Please subscribe for," I think it was $1 a month. I thought to myself, of all the stories to make unavailable to people who just want to know the news, you're going to take a serious issue that is currently being dealt with and say, You can only read this or know about this if you pay us a certain amount of cash that we're already making off the other people who are subscribed to us anyway. Envoy says, what's scary, people have the power to exact change, yet are either ignorant, lazy, complacent, or just plain stupid. Trump should have never gotten office. But this goes, and this is kind of the point I'm making. The narrative that was pushed last year was that if Hillary got in office, she would do everything Obama did and nothing would change. This was one thing to keep the way it was. I'm no fan of his either, but his net neutrality policy was on point. Leave it alone. That was it. Don't mess with it. Freedom of speech preserved. And you lose one election, and now millions of people are having their lives affected. Only 13% of Americans don't use the internet. And what bothers me is that you look at my most popular video, people are more focused on a guy saying why he won't go on a date than on their entire this platform that we all use being scrubbed of something that is in the U.S. Constitution, freedom of speech, because the Constitution was written centuries prior to the internet coming about. Well, I don't agree with her either, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. This goes beyond party politics. This is, and I don't want to turn this into some endorsement of Bernie or any of that, but the corporate elite and what it can do to you and I is a very serious thing. And if one good thing comes out of this abolition of freedom of speech within a couple of weeks, is that people will hopefully will say, you know what, there are things we just can't ignore. If you saw a tank driving down your street, would you ignore it? If you saw a giant snake in your back tree, the tree in your backyard, are you going to pretend that's not there? Especially if it comes and busts out your windows, you shouldn't. You know, I can understand the idea of, I don't care about the news or politics or whatever, but this goes beyond an election or who to vote for or who to say you're a fan of. No, the masses let it go by because they're under this idea of, oh, well, you know, I can just go to work the next day or school. What's the problem? Problem is, a lot of them use emails. A lot of them use these websites. You know, we are a society that's become more and more devoted to the internet. I told you, only 13% of us don't use it. So really, you know, the TYT's videos on this matter should have millions of views. This at least should have what that other one had, but it probably won't even get 1/10 of that, which would be 10,000. Because people actively are not seeking to know about this, and it's going to come back to bite them in a couple of weeks. You know, this is one issue. They talk about unity and all things that bring us together. We all use the internet, and we all delight in being able to say most of what we want and typically get away with it. You know, they're getting the ability to assert so much power to where if they don't appreciate your company, you try going on your website and you sit there for however long, you're going to know it was directed toward you and hurting whatever platform you have. No, TFL, I'm gonna read the part of this article so you don't go anywhere. Internet providers will be free to experiment with fast and slow lanes, prioritize their own traffic, and block apps and services. There's really only one rule left here, that ISPs have to publicly disclose when they're doing these things. So I want you to think about this, because when you just read those lines, it might not come off to you. It didn't come off to me until I thought more about it. With internet providers being able to freely experiment with slow and fast lanes, they can make their lanes fast and yours slow if you're their competition or if you're not their competition. Maybe they just want to be the site that most people will go to and not have to wait that long. And by prioritizing their own traffic, they've made it to where that's kind of in line with it, but it extends to the idea of, okay, well, if you're one of us, you get pushed forward and you're more important. Our thing is the main thing. Everyone else is kind of a background filler character. how your interests operate to how they see fit. It's a money scheme. I want you to understand something. Even though Pi is the kind of the centerpiece, central figure in people's minds when it's coming to the FCC chairman, when it comes to this repeal, it's not necessarily that he is a villain. It's the idea that he is being made to do things that are not in the best interest of the overwhelming majority of Americans for the sake of putting more cash into his own pocket. Well, TFL, if he did speak about that, it wasn't something I caught. And I like to, I'm not, dismissing that you're making this statement, but I haven't seen it myself, is what I'm conveying to you. I'm a person who follows this pretty actively, so I don't think he mentioned it that much, if he did at all. Envoy says there has always been a system of control, whether it be iPhones, which track wherever you go with inbuilt systems and metro cards, laptops, and anything electronic. Yeah, I get that. But you have to understand, even when you had those iPhones that could track where you were, that didn't stop you from getting other cell phones that couldn't track where you were. You could obtain a BlackBerry, and you can still use much of the same types of apps and services on those other phones. They're doing a thing now with, if this comes to pass, where you don't get that option. You don't get to say, I don't want to go to this site, I'll just go to the other one, because they're going to slow it down so much to where you get aggravated and go, okay, fine, I'll just deal with this other place. Then they can jack up their prices knowing you're going to pay for it anyway. Okay, Harvey says, yeah, and it's just another attempt to brainwash us all, make us live by the agenda. Pretty much. I'm telling you, I had a thing where I really didn't want to. I was kind of debating whether to keep speaking about political things as much, because there's this idea of, oh, it won't get many views, but even if it doesn't, I can't. It's one of those things where it's so worrisome to me. I just don't want to pretend that it's not that big of a deal. I've never seen JACM Jack Mike 23. The end of the world is near. Between this and the U.S. North Korea war, I guess so. We're experiencing things that are just. If we had the right person and people in these positions, we wouldn't have happening. And one of the problems that recurs is that people only become focused after whatever false or horrible action is done. We don't talk about gun control until someone blows a place up. We don't talk about trying to put safety on airplanes until they crash. We don't talk about just doing anything that benefits us collectively. And some trolls in here talking about Russian hackers. And laughing about it too. She probably works for the Kremlin, Putin, and all of the other central characters at the head of this. Okay, I don't know what TFL's laughing about. Envoy says, we're young men, it's good to discuss this. The major issue with talking politics is that people agenda always get in the way of the point that rhetoric can't be changed. Well, here's my mind frame. I come out typically with what I am, which is a person who's not affiliated with either party, even if I do say my views are more in line with an ideology than one or the other. Many of these positions that we collectively have, whether it be wanting an internet that contains freedom of speech, are popular views that transcend party barriers. You will seldom find someone that says, yes, we need more regulations on the internet that take away people's ability to just interact and talk and have dialogues. So I want to just go over this again. Internet providers will be free to experiment with fast and slow lanes, prioritize their own traffic, and block apps and services. So if any of you decide to make an app and AT&T doesn't like it, pull the plug on it or just block it to where no one can see it. And this is really where I keep going back to this thing of people who want to be successful, which I think a majority of us do, who want to branch out online and want to use whatever platform is necessary, are having a platform taken from underneath them and not paying attention to it. Yeah, JC Mike, the only way I see it being prevented is if we continue this effort and these petitions, call up these Congress members. I'm going to call some more very soon. Problem is and that's another thing. We need to get rid of this. Most of, I can think of maybe 6 or 7 people currently in both chambers of Congress that I believe should stay. Everybody else, in my view, should just be swept out. And whether they're Democrat or Republican, if they follow these ideologies, they need to go. They're taking this corporate money and screwing us over in the way that they've been doing for decades. It needs to hit its end. Envoy says, I agree with you. The issue with net neutrality is that it overrides political allegiance. Well, but you also, I want you to really think about this. This has more so to do with that election, this past year's presidential election. This should show you the ramifications of certain things. Even if you thought Trump was just going to go in there and be kind of a pseudo-liberal, you have people around him who are more radical and extreme, and he doesn't notice that or just doesn't care about that, so they get put in these positions to go and practice or carry out something that's incredulous. So it has to do with who gets in office, but also who that person in office is able to pick. Remember, this FCC chairman's ship wasn't an elected office. He appointed him to that job. Okay, Jack Mick 23 says, imagine in the near future there's some crazy alternative that rivals the internet and picks up. Oh yeah, that's one of the biggest problems with the current system. We only have one version of being able to go online. We need to have competition for anything to want to stay of decency. If only McDonald's existed and there was no other restaurant for people to go to, they know that they can go and make their products even worse and just not bother with improving the quality of their workplace. Yeah, Donahue, that's kind of irrelevant to this. If I wouldn't have a problem necessarily discussing it later on, but it's not the main thing. And that's not even new. That's from 2 years ago, when he gave the swearing in a couple of months before his son Bo died. So I don't really get where that's now at the centerpiece of discussion. But I guess me and other people are moving at different wavelengths in terms of how relevant a story is to the topic at hand. I have no problem discussing that on another stream, but this is kind of what needs to be understood right now. The only way you get people to just focus on this is by saying, hey, forget everything else. Forget what Trump said about this person today. Forget about Thanksgiving, or forget about anything else going on at this point. Okay, Donahue, net neutrality is what allows people to have what is considered within the United States Constitution freedom of speech. It allows there to be an internet that is not privy to being controlled by a group of corporations or some hidden hand figure. And part of the reason it's not protected by the Constitution is that the internet wasn't around back when that was written, and none of the amendments have been passed since the 70s, so it wasn't there. But to give you an idea of what happens if we don't have it, you will see internet providers be free to experiment with fast and slow lanes, prioritize their own traffic, and block apps and services. So that means if net neutrality isn't there, which they're going to have a vote on December 12th, by a guy chairman who wants it to be gotten rid of, that means if you try to come on YouTube and they don't like something on YouTube and you try to click that video, you're going to have this long loading screen where it just stays up and stays up to where you just give up and don't want to watch it. And if there's some group or place that has a website online and you like them, but the company doesn't like them and they're in charge of their internet provider like AT&T, they can make that company's lane just slow to the point where you don't even want to bother with sitting there and waiting for it. So I think I've tried to explain as best as I can. Let's say it's something very important because it's what allows me to be able to speak right now and not ever get yanked. And honestly, it's the other problem with it. This person's trying to mess with us again. That Russian Kremlin individual. Uh, that's their prerogative. Talking about their planned cryptic internet language. Oh, but the thing that still is just driving me crazy is that, as I stated earlier in this stream, you had a person who wrote an article for the LA Times that said, "I'm with the FCC, stop us from killing net neutrality," and then you go on there to click it, they tell you you've reached the monthly limit of free articles. You're really going to try and make me pay to let me respond on, but you're really going to make me pay for information that should be free, that's going to literally affect more than 8/10 of the people that live in the U.S. Okay, Envoy asked, "Do you I guess you mean to say personally see Trump being in office for another term?" Oh yeah. Um, there's only maybe three people I think that could win against him on the Democratic side, but he's definitely. And the sad thing is, this is one of the main issues they could use against him. Hey, he appointed the guy that tried to kill the internet, even if it doesn't work out, or kill the internet. So I think he has a very good chance of it, and that's more so due to the fact that the DNC is continuing with not learning lessons from the past while catering to the same groups that were allotted to just buy out their politicians ever since the repeal of Citizens United, or it being overturned. Oh, but yeah, I just think it's ridiculous how we have a couple of people in here who are paying attention to this, and then have millions that only are going to pay attention when they log on their computer and everything starts going slow. I mean, that to me is what is so sickening about this, and it's not necessarily saying the people who aren't paying attention are sickening. It's based around the idea of people who this does not reflect the best interest of are still going to go out and vote for Trump again, and aren't going to engage in trying to stop this. They're going to put up with it for years. So I feel a great sense. Yeah, look confused and lost. Well, they don't pay attention to this, and that's why they're confused and lost. I'm sitting still amazed at the idea of a newspaper putting out an exclusive article on a topic that's going to affect millions of people, and then telling me I need to pay them to see that article. Anything for a cheap buck, I guess. Oh yeah, they're another group that could get taken down. The LA Times, if uh, some internet providers are affiliated with, I don't know, CNN, they can just say, okay, well, we're going to make their site go slow, so you don't go on there, or just not work. But again, they're not trying to educate you on this. They're trying to gain more funding for their own benefits. Which I get the idea of corporations doing that, but there's some things you would think you have a special attention to. I guess not. And these numbers really are depressing. 6 people, when what is over 60 million are going to be affected by this. So I'm at a loss for words. This is a combination of the act, the people's response to the act, And that's pretty much it. Those two things going together. Yeah, Envoy, they aren't for the people. They wish to benefit from the people. Jack Mike, I wouldn't say it's the worst Thanksgiving because this isn't happening on Thanksgiving. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's something that we can look back at it either way and go, this is something that loomed over our heads, but it didn't actually occur that day. And I think that will be the one benefit of today, that we try to give it some attention and time and state where it's wrong to be allowed to just jeopardize people's rights in this manner. So I'll get off of here. I'll do definitely something else of this nature tomorrow. Um, look at that troll talking about Snowden. No, Envoy, the protests likely are going to just be leveled at people standing around picketing and giving speeches and things of that nature. Yeah, it is crazy that they don't realize their livelihoods at stake. But that's the willful refusal to just pay attention to things that matter. We'll go more into that as time passes. So see you.